Evening, everyone, and welcome to the Power Hour panel. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Power Hour panel. Current events that are happening across the globe and right here in this great nation as well. Before we jump into the broadcast, I do want to thank our sponsor, Parts Authority, for sponsoring this show. If you are looking for parts for your car, whether you are a garage, a car enthusiast, or maybe you just need parts for your car, go ahead and call Parts Authority. Now, this evening, we're really going to be talking about two things: the Russian Ukraine war and everything that is surrounding that. And we will also be discussing the People's Convoy. But first and foremost, let's really jump into what's happening between Russia and Ukraine. Now, right now, there is a lot of different things happening between Russia and Ukraine, and it's looking as though it's not going to get any better. Russia is still attacking civilian areas. We do know that Russia and Ukraine did decide to try and have the humanitarian corridor where Ukrainians could leave peacefully and there'd be a ceasefire. But it seems as though all of those ceasefires apparently fell apart. And Ukrainians did have difficulties fleeing the country. But before we dive in and really talk about what's actually going on in the nation, let's see what everyone's opinion is about the Russian-Ukraine war currently going on. So Wade, what are your thoughts about the present situation happening between Russia and Ukraine?
So I think I have a lot of thoughts about it, but I'm definitely pro-Ukraine. Good old. Did you know the Ukrainian president was a comedian on TV shows? Did you know that?
I don't think that's relevant at the moment, Wade.
This is very relevant. Did you know that in one of his TV shows, he was playing a guy who could play the piano, but he didn't play the piano with his hands. He played it with his junk.
No.
Yeah, so he's bouncing up and down playing on the piano, right? I just want Putin to know that the guy kicking his ass right now is the guy who was playing piano with his dick. I'm doing that's just great.
And Roger, what's your thoughts about what's happening in Russia and Ukraine at the moment?
I think that it seems to me that there is two aspects of the conflict, and one is that everyone is still tied up in the argument or justifications on whether, whose fault it was and all that sort of thing. That will come out in the wash. In my mind, this is Putin caused this war. There may well have been, some serious reasons why he was unhappy, but you can be unhappy internationally, and there are all range of human rights courts, the United Nations. There's all range of opportunities to deal with those issues. Invading a country can never be seen as being a reasonable option to resolve the issue. And it's a fair argument that people will come up with internationally, particularly saying, oh, but America does it and Britain do it and other countries have done it. The big difference for this one is that the main belligerent is armed with nuclear weapons and is threatening them. And the likely defender beyond Ukraine is also armed with nuclear weapons. So there's a distinct, outstanding value to this war than any previous war since World War II. So that's an issue that's there. The thing that's interesting me is how it's going. And being an ex-military man, I'm obviously have a bias here, but I'm also a studying historian. This is not going well for Russia in every direction. And it really begs the question, what were the benefits that Putin thought he would get out of doing a physical invasion? So it's just, I don't think we're fully understanding where everything is at the moment, and that's fine, we'll deal with it as it goes, but it also still has so many different variables to it as to where it could go that everyone is just really guessing at this stage. but I think I've said on the show a couple of weeks ago, if I was living in Moldova, I'd be very concerned at the moment. If I was living in, if I was a parent of a child who's serving in the army in Belarus, I'd be really worried at this moment too. I would be very amazed if by this time next week, if Belarus hasn't joined the conflict. And of course, as long as they're keeping the conflict contained to the Ukraine, NATO doesn't really have an option to get involved. So they're just going to have to sit back and suck it up. So look, it's very, very complex. And the answers, I don't think, are all clear yet.
So I do think it's very complex. I greatly doubt that it's going to stay in Ukraine. I think this is going to spread, and it's going to spread like wildfire pretty soon, actually. And then, so Halo, thoughts on the Russian-Ukraine war?
Okay. I don't know if you guys believe in God and the devil, but we got a devil in the house. Seriously, I tell you, I believe he's the devil. Putin has to be taken out. He shouldn't even started this thing. I mean, how much do you have to have? He has all of Russia. Why does he want Ukraine too? And I know we've talked about this, and I know that Sean has told us about the nuclear and everything like this, but come on, somebody really has to take him out. That's all I have to say.
And then Jeff, thoughts on the Russian-Ukraine war?
Okay, I guess my perspective on this crisis, war, is quite different from the three people who have spoken so far, Wade, Roger, Sahela. I think that NATO has been expanding, well, ever since it was founded in 1949, but that expansion intensified after the old Soviet Union disintegrated in 1991. And NATO promised, the United States and other NATO countries, such as Germany, promised Soviet Union, which was becoming Russia, at that time, that NATO would not expand 1 inch to the east. And that was put into written agreements and treaties. NATO immediately started violating that pledge and started, inviting new countries to join. And obviously, Russia felt threatened, their national security. Russia has been invaded twice in the 20th century by Germany, and then back in the 1800s by Napoleon, all from the West. And to see a hostile military alliance, NATO, advancing toward its borders must have been extremely threatening to the Russians. They've tried to solve the problem diplomatically by asking for neutrality for Ukraine for decades now. NATO and the United States refused. So this war is a result of Washington's refusal to simply say, yes, NATO is never going, Ukraine is never going to join NATO. Ukraine is going to be neutral. That's all we would have had to do to prevent this conflict. Instead, the United States fomented a coup in 2014 in Ukraine and installed a puppet government heavily influenced by actual Nazis. And you can imagine if you had been the Russians in World War II, had some 27 million of your people killed by Nazi Germany, you would not feel good about having a country dominated by militaristic Nazis on your border. So I see three villains here.
Okay, so
So I'm going to
Three
disagree with you
villains. The
there.
United States,
adding.
NATO, and Ukraine are the villains. And Russia is
So I'm going to
reacting
disagree with you there.
appropriately.
So I'm going to disagree with you there. So I know going back,
Okay.
so there's been a lot of propaganda surrounding Ukraine with the puppet and whatnot, even going back to 2019 when the protests were happening in Hong Kong, and even Hong Kong saying that Ukraine was sending Nazis into Hong Kong to protest. However, as we all know, President Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, is Jewish. There has been no actual evidence of Nazis, and Ukraine has essentially been leaving Russia alone. I will agree with you that Ukraine has been trying to join NATO. They want to join the EU, but they are a sovereign nation, and they have every right as a sovereign nation to go in and try and join whatever organization that they want to. Russia does not have a right to say that Ukraine cannot try to join the EU, that Ukraine cannot try to join NATO. Russia is not in charge of Ukraine. Russia has no say in Ukrainian politics. And as much as Russia wants to control what Ukraine does, we're in a situation where Ukraine is a sovereign nation and they have the right to do what they want with their country and join whatever military alliance that they want.
And that's
So,
why
I
Putin's
will
doing
leave.
this, because he wants everything under his power. That's the issue right there.
Can I just make the comment? What Jeff's saying is, I'm sorry, from a historical point of view, it can be easily challenged. I mean, yes, Russia has experienced invasion from the west, but they've also experienced invasion from the east. You know, they've been. If you want to go back far enough, you know, it was actually a massive area of Mongol expansion. You know, many centuries ago. But I mean, they themselves. I mean, Poland has been invaded by Russia 3 times in the last 150 years. You know, including collusion with the Nazis in 1939 to share Poland. You know, so it's almost, again, this is like the point I was making before. There's 2 parts to what's going on. There's this never-ending argument now about people, both sides justifying who was right and who was wrong in doing the invading. I've read, particularly recently because of this conflict, I've read the 1994 agreements. There's 4 different agreements there to do with the subdivision of the Soviet Union into the constituent states where the borders were. President Yeltsin was quite happy to sign an agreement with Ukraine defining the borders that included the Donbass region of eastern Ukraine and the Crimea, although the Crimea was then subcontracted, for a lot of the Crimea, including the naval base, was subcontracted back to Russia, who paid a rent for it. And they still do pay the rent, even though they've seized it back. So it's not, and this nonsense about, you know, Ukraine's full of Nazis, it's just, this is a propaganda talking point that's taken hold, and it's a popular point to make. It's an independent country. Putin's upset with them because Zelensky got elected and in doing so ousted the Russian puppet that was there before him. So, you know, it's just nonsense. Sorry. I'm sorry.
But so
Okay,
switching
so we
topics,
disagree about the history. Fine. What's the current topic is how's the war going? I think the war is going extremely well for Russia, and that Ukraine has been almost completely defeated. Their military, their heavy equipment has been destroyed by Russian missiles and artillery. A bulk of their army in eastern Ukraine is surrounded and is facing the choice right now of whether to surrender or be annihilated. There are a number of other cities that have been loosely approached or cut off by Russian forces, and Russia is using the same tactics that they and the Syrian government used in Idlib against Islamist terrorists there for the last several years. They're providing humanitarian corridors for civilians to escape. Also, fighters who are willing to give up their weapons. Russia is allowing them to go to Western Ukraine, which would fulfill the same role that Idlib province fulfills in Syria. So the Russians have been methodical. They have been careful to avoid civilian casualties.
No, they haven't.
And they're about to completely defeat Ukraine militarily.
Let me ask you a few questions.
Okay,
Jeff.
so
Hold on, I want to ask you a few
first
questions.
we're gonna go to
Bill.
Wade. Wade,
Yeah.
one second. We're gonna go to Wade. We're gonna go to Sohaila. Then we're gonna jump to the Venezuelan thing. But go ahead, Wade. Go ahead and ask your questions.
So I just have a couple questions for you because I'm trying to understand where you're coming from. You said that the U.S. and Germany and NATO and all that are a bunch of Nazis.
No, I didn't say that. I said they're villains.
They're
They are
villains.
the
Okay.
aggressors in this situation. So
Okay.
not
You
Nazi.
use Nazi in there somewhere, but I just wanted to make
Ukrainians.
sure that the Ukrainians are Nazis.
Yeah.
Okay. You realize that President Lazinski is Jewish, right?
Irrelevant.
Okay.
What do you mean?
You realize he's a Soviet Jew, right?
Huh?
You realize he grew up in a Soviet nation, Jewish, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. All right. The next thing I want to ask you about is what strain of pot are you smoking? Because
No,
you
that's a
sound
silly
like
question.
you sound like a communist. You're rooting for the man who attacked his own citizens to justify a war by blowing up an apartment building. You're saying that he's trying to avoid civilian casualties. We have literal videos of Russian arms blowing up civilian residences and hospitals. You've got Russians attacking nuclear power plants. You've got confirmed radioactive material leaving Chernobyl, tracked by satellites going to Russia. So what I want to know is why you believe that the Jewish Ukrainians are Nazis and that Putin is this great god and he's in the right.
Okay, well, Zelensky is in a tough position. He's way over his head. Yes, he's Jewish, but let's assume 6 months ago that President Zelensky had said, yes, we are going to remain neutral. We no longer want to join this military alliance, NATO. You know what would have happened to him? He would have been assassinated by the Nazis in the Ukrainian militias. See, the Nazis don't comprise a majority of Ukrainian people. Far from it. They're a minority, but they're heavily armed and they're willing to use weapons to get their way.
But if Nazis were in Ukraine wouldn't even be there because of the Nazis in the first place. All they want is to be independent, and they want to be free of anybody out there, especially Putin. Putin is a bully. I mean, he bullies his whole his whole representation. I mean, didn't you guys? Yes, you saw it on TV. Come on, all his cronies, are afraid of him, and why? I mean, I just don't get how many people are backing him. Why?
Yeah,
Also,
his
I've noticed-
popularity went up. It was
Look,
about
guys.
60%, and it's now 71% among Russians because they
So, guys, I'm
realized
going to
that
go ahead and go to
Russians
the comments now.
Russians
So I'm
were
going to go
being
ahead and go to the
attacked.
comments because we do have to move. We do have to move on from the next
Okay.
topic. So
Sure.
Philip says, Roger, all the neighboring nations should be worried. Amanda says, I swear Putin started this because he feels he won't truly be contested, considering he's going to be in office until 2036.
Right.
Philip says, Sohaila is on point. The devil is out and we need to neutralize him. Amanda is agreeing with Philip. Philip says, come on, Jeff, be real. Amanda says, Russia is acting out because Ukraine won't go back to being the Soviet Union. There's control freaks.
Yeah.
Joanna says, while Putin's plan has been derailed to a certain degree, he was not expecting the Ukrainian people to be so courageous. Philip says, well said, Roger. Lindsay says, Putin severely underestimated the Ukrainian people, forgetting that they were formerly some of Russia's fiercest fighters. Amanda says, what should Putin overthrow, or whatever Russia equivalent is, the position he's putting his constituents in? Banks not having money, MasterCard and Visa stopping their cards working over there. People are going to be in a horrible position soon.
Disagree with Amanda.
Lindsay
I
says,
agree too. I mean, China is backing him now.
China is back. Well, we're gonna get to the China-Russia relationship. We can keep everything in the correct time. So, guys, when I cut you off, love you guys to death, but we got to stay on time. Amanda says, you can't be a Nazi and a Jew. LOL, what? Amanda says, Jeff, Putin can't hear you. You're not just safe from Putin because you're side with him. He doesn't care about you. And then Lindsay says, I'm livid right now because claiming that Zelensky being Jewish is irrelevant and calling him a Nazi is the most disgraceful thing I ever heard on this show.
Sorry.
So again, guys, we're moving on. So we're gonna move on to this. It still has to do with Russia. Russia is going to be the topic of the evening until the very, very end. But let's talk about Venezuela. So right now, the United States will be sending representatives to Venezuela in order to try and negotiate getting Venezuela oil into the United States. Now, for the most part, American citizens at this time are really focusing in on oil. However, this is something that is diplomatically important because Russia and Venezuela are allies. And if the United States does enter into the war, the United States will start having to watch back because of Latin American countries that could potentially side with Russia. Now, while Venezuela and the United States will be meeting for the first time since 2019, because remember, the Trump administration's put sanction on Venezuela because.
Oh, her battery is got excited.
That's that.
Okay, so first of all, we shouldn't even be going to Venezuela. We should start getting our own gas and our own oil from our own damn country. Period.
Well, there's two parts to this that she cut out. There's two parts to this. So first off, Venezuela is very pro-Russian. They're friends. And they're friends basically because they hate the U.S. because the U.S. said, fuck you, and put a bunch of sanctions on them. All right. So wars, for those of you who don't understand war is fought for three reasons: women, land, and religion. And land encompasses resources, money, things like that. That's what that encompasses. Those are the three reasons war is fought.
I agree with 2 out of 3 on that.
Right? So Venezuela, they're sending diplomats to Venezuela to try and get oil right now. And the second part is to try and kiss their ass and say, we're real sorry, but we want you to be our friends in case we go to World War III. So two separate arguments for the moment. So let's set the kissing ass to the side for the minute. Let's go back to the oil for a second. We wouldn't need Russia and we wouldn't need Venezuela for oil if we had just completed our own pipeline.
Exactly.
We would produce twice as much oil as what we import a day. Now, granted, we don't want Russian enemies or Russian collaborators, Venezuela, being so close to us. Totally agree, but that's a separate point in this. The original point is that we should have completed our own pipeline so that we are not reliant on all these foreign entities for our own power and movement.
Exactly.
Well, Wade,
So
I think the pipeline you're talking about is for fracked oil and fracked natural gas, right? So the fracking boom is almost over. There's a whole lot of oil down there, very deep below the rocks, but it's very expensive to get it out, and it's very damaging to the environment. The entire North American fracking industry has never made a profit in its entire history.
So
And,
we'd rather align with
It's
somebody else.
not, it's not as impressive a resource as you might think.
Even in Texas, in our Gulf, we have enough oil. There is enough oil reserves in the U.S. to last us almost 300 years at our current growth rate. The problem that we have is that we have, and it's a separate issue that must be addressed. I'm going to agree with you on this, Jeff, that the people mining the oil are doing it in such a way that they're prioritizing profits over the environment.
Yeah.
Totally agree with you. But we are also a nation in this day and age with the technology that we have that we can overcome that. It will cost money. Don't get me wrong. It will cost money. But if I was in charge, I would spend the money in overcoming that issue to make us self-reliant than relying on people outside of our borders for our own and very survival.
So this is what
Can
I'm
I
going to
just
say.
say?
I know right now the United States is concerned about oil, but that is not where the concern can be. Wade, do you want to read Las Vegas Lights comments from Smoke and Bacon? So the Smoke and Bacon comments don't pop up on the screen, but do you want to read that one?
Sure. Las Vegas says, Mel raised a point in a previous show. This conflict offers openings for opportunistic people in Latin America. This, I think, may possibly be a more serious threat than Russia itself.
Right now, the best thing that the United States can do is seal this deal with Venezuela. We are heading into World War III, and we're looking at the lines being drawn already. It's almost inevitable that we are going to get into war. This conflict is going to spread. This conflict is going to spread way past Ukraine and Russia, and the rest of the world is going to have to pick sides. At this point, we cannot have enemies to the south of us. We cannot have bases where places where Russia is able to build military bases to easily bomb the United States. We need to make friends with Venezuela. Now, the Trump administration was correct when they put the sanctions on Venezuela. But right now, Biden administration needs to go in and ensure that we can separate Russia from the rest of its allies.
Well, good luck. Russia and China are very close allies now. And these sanctions that the United States and Europe have been imposing on Russia are not going to work. Russia can get everything it needs from China, India, and other countries that have not been willing to join in the sanctions craze. But the United States can't. We can't get everything we need if we cut ourselves off from Eurasia. And so the effect of these sanctions is suicidal for our own economy. If we don't stop trying to make Russia's economy scream, our own economy is going to collapse. There are things that we cannot get, and they're critical to the operation of an industrial society. And if we keep attacking China's and Russia's economy, they are going to start counter-sanctioning us, and we are going to go into a Great Depression that could last 20, 30 years. We can't win. We can't beat China and Russia, either economically or militarily. And Mel, I wouldn't be worried about Venezuela, attacks against the United States, military attacks from South America. That's not a concern. That Russia has no interest in attacking the United States. Nobody wants to conquer the United States. It's just not. It's not a reasonable fear. The fear is that we will be cut off and our economy will tank, and we'll never recover from it.
I have a quick question, Jeff.
Let's go to Roger first.
I just have one question real quick, because it's going to put a lot of things in perspective. Jeff, were you in the military in any way, shape, or form?
Nope.
Okay.
Roger, go ahead.
Yeah, I actually agree with Jeff on the fact that Venezuela is one, it's not going to attack America, and two, Russia's not going to be building anything there anytime soon. Russia's economy, even before the sanctions, was not so strong that they're in a position to be building foreign bases. They're on the edge of they've been trying to get out of Syria for ages now, and Putin hasn't been able to get them out of Syria, and it's costing them a fortune. The whole sanctions thing is really quite interesting. My concern is the sanctions are actually too effective, and force Russia into taking even more dramatic action. So the trick for the rest of the world is to find a level of sanctions that gets them to a point of negotiating, and then quickly lifts key sanctions so that Russia's not forced into total collapse. And that may well be only achieved by having a regime change in Russia. But there's another benefit, I reckon. I'm a very positive man, but I think there's some huge benefits here for America and the rest of the world, and particularly those who embrace the global warming issue, is that situations like this create people having to adapt and alter the way that they handle life. If renewable industries aren't steaming ahead at the moment, and looking to step into the void and finding a solution. So if your oil is cut off and you're struggling to find other oil, then it's time to start really accelerate the efforts you're making to alternative means. The other thing I would say on the oil thing, there's plenty of oil still being produced and can be produced by countries that are supportive of America and the rest of the world's stance on Russia at the moment. So it's not Russia and Venezuela have got, gripped the planet by, total control. They haven't. I'm pretty old-fashioned. I've lived through quite a few wars now. And I've studied a lot of wars. Everybody predicts that, it's the end of the world. It's the end of the world. It's not the end of the world. We will adapt. We will find a way. Also, not totally confident, but reasonably confident that World War III can still be avoided here, but there's probably quite a bit more pain to go through yet. But I'm a little bit confused as to why America is going cap in hand to Venezuela. I think it's unnecessary. I think Wade and Mel are right. And Sahela are right that the fossil fuel assets in America alone are enough to sustain that country if Mr. Biden just turned the tap back on with them.
So I'm going to say this. I'm going to say this.
I'm still confused.
America is really bad at war. We spend a lot of money on war, but we are really bad at war. I ask this question constantly when we talk about war in the United States. When is the last time that America won a war? So go ahead in the comment section, on Twitter, on Facebook, on the apps. When's the last time that America won a war? Number one,
I'm going to say Japan was involved.
America does not win wars anymore.
Yes.
America
I love
spends
it.
a lot of money on war, and they do not win.
Well, because we like to
I
stick
do think,
our nose in everybody's business. That's the issue.
Yes.
but we don't win. We
I
do
know.
not have a winning track record.
Right.
Now,
I would
the other
disagree,
thing
and I would
is,
agree with Las
America
Vegas
is
more,
not
Mel.
used to fighting war on American soil.
I would
What'd you say,
agree with
Wade?
Las Vegas more. It's not that we're bad at war. It's our politicians don't let us do war correctly.
Right. Yeah, because they don't know the
I
meaning
mean,
of war.
either way,
War has no stipulations. You just go for it. You don't say, no, when's the time to go? No. There's no room for stipulations. War is war. You just
Look,
go,
we knew how to do war back in the day.
right?
We invented that shit.
but wait,
Yeah,
so
but
we
in
are
politics.
we are really bad at war. No matter if you want to blame it on the military or if you want to blame it on politicians, we are bad at war. However,
I agree.
when is the last time Americans have fought war on our own soil?
Civil War,
During the
right?
Cold War, the Civil War. During the Cold War, the reason why
believe we won the
America was
Civil
so at odds with Cuba is because of their proximity to the United States. And America did not want commies so close. And they didn't want
back
missiles
up.
so close.
And where were the missiles coming from?
Cuba.
No, who was providing the
No,
missiles to Cuba?
Soviet Union
Russia.
was providing
Russia.
missiles to help defend their ally Cuba from invasion
But that's
by
what
the
I'm
United
saying.
States.
So, not from invasion from the United States, but we won't get into Cold War politics. That
Okay.
is why I have a huge concern for Latin America at the moment. It's not that the United States can't defeat a Latin American military, it's that Russia, China, and Venezuela and other smaller Latin American countries could side against the Western world and then set up bases against a nation, the United States, who is not used to fighting war on its own turf and who's not used to winning war in decades. And that is my big concern about Latin America. So Putin has ties with Venezuela, but the Biden administration needs to come in and make things right. Initially, opening the doors with taking the sanctions off of oil.
You
So
can't
we do
say
have oil
make
coming
right
in.
and agree with the sanctions that were put in place in another breath. You can say work out the differences. You can say come to an agreement, but you can't say make right when you say I agree
When I
with
say-
the reason
so-
they were put in place to begin with.
I mean, so when I
That
say
means
make
we didn't
right,
do anything
I'm not.
wrong.
So when I say make right, I mean, I think you either I didn't say it clearly enough. When I say make right, they need to make this situation right so we don't have enemies at our southern border. That's what when I
You
say
mean come
make
to an
right, that's what I
agreement.
mean. Yeah.
Come to a
Yeah,
mutually
I'm,
beneficial agreement. You can
I'm
say
not so
that. That
sure.
would be acceptable.
I'm not so sure that you're going to convince people who, for the last 20 years, have been hating you to suddenly warm up to you and switch their ideology away from Russia or China just because you're playing nice with them and forgiving them and lifting the sanctions and it's like if you've got a finite amount of effort, how much of it are you going to spend on that, or are you going to spend elsewhere in the world reinforcing those nations that are in alliance with you? I mean, just look at the UN vote on Russia. You know, what was it? 15 countries abstained, or it's a bit more than that, but another, a dozen countries, North Korea, China, voted against it. But the vast majority of the countries on the planet, voted with the UN resolution. This is not just America versus Russia. This is not just America, on their own. America is not the world. The vast majority of the world have voted through the United Nations. Even countries like Turkey and Hungary, who happen to be both members of NATO, but are very close to Russia, or were very close. Even they may not have come the whole hog to support sanctions, although they have supported sanctions, but they were very uncomfortable about them. But they made it perfectly clear to Russia that invading Ukraine was not on. Now that's Russia's two closest European allies. It's just so it's more than the US. It's the whole world.
What I don't understand is why didn't they even? Why did they let them even start this in the first place? They could have stopped this a few weeks ago. It didn't have to get this far, and that's
How?
what pisses me off.
No, it
How?
would have went this far no matter what. You got to understand, Putin is trying to make a statement. That's what he's doing. So,
Mhm.
all right, let's look at this from a different point of view for a second, all right? Let's assume that NATO is not a bunch of Nazis, a bunch of villains, okay? Let's assume that the North Atlantic Treaty is operating as originally designed. It was designed to provide protection for people that couldn't protect themselves. So the smaller countries, the smaller nations, and it's also meant as a deterrent for the larger nations. All right. So the smaller nations, let's say Turkey, Hungary, Sweden. Sweden's not a part of it, but Sweden. Those are my examples for smaller nations. The larger nations being the USA, Canada, England, Russia, things like that. Larger being militarily wise. Okay. So the original goal was we're going to take the powerful guys, the big brothers, and we're going to protect the smaller guys. So if someone attacks the smaller guys, the big brothers jump into the fight. It's just like when you got your ass kicked in high school and you went home and told your big brother, I got beat up, and him and his friends went and beat up the other guy. That's really what it is.
Right.
All right. So let's go with that for a minute. So why wouldn't places like Moldavia, Ukraine, things like that are literally bordered up right against a larger nation that could potentially overtake them, why wouldn't they want to be part of this protective umbrella? Now, the deterrent part of this is it's meant to keep the larger nations from doing stupid shit like Russia's doing right now. All right? If a larger nation attacks another larger nation or a smaller nation, the rest of the big brothers come out and say, you can't do that. And we're here to stop you. So I don't understand why it's such a big deal that Russia says you can't be a part of that. And the only reason they say you can't be a part of that is because they got plans to either invade them, absorb them, or take them over later. And you can't use the argument of I'm scared of NATO when you're 3/4 the size of the world. All right. Now, if you're going to use the argument that my soldiers suck and give up freaking military hardware to farmers and tractors, and now we're using civilian vehicles with a Z on them because I'm tired of losing vehicles, or my pilots suck, or they can't shoot straight, that's a different story.
What I don't understand is what was the difference? Why didn't Ukraine go into NATO anyways?
That was a huge red line for Russia. Russia has been warning the West for 30 years that Ukraine will not become part of NATO, period. End of story.
Yes, but
it's an existential threat to the national security of the Russian people.
But it has no threat.
Independent now, so why didn't they decide to go with NATO?
So hold on, Jeff. How is the Ukraine?
Okay, I'll tell you. United States built missile bases in Poland and Romania. They claim that they're anti-ballistic missile bases.
There are no nuclear missiles in Romania or
within a few hours, you can switch out those anti-ballistic missiles and replace them with offensive Tomahawk cruise missiles that could attack Russia. It's something like 8 minutes to Leningrad and Moscow. Flight
You do
time.
realize that we don't need to do that anymore, that we can launch a missile from right here in the U.S. and hit Moscow, right? We don't have
That
to switch
that would mean World War III, a complete full-scale nuclear war, and humanity would cease to exist.
But what's
If the United States were to
Ukraine
fire a nuclear weapon at Russia, that would be the end of humanity, the end of the human experiment.
But Jeff, I'm that's not what I was asking. I was asking, why didn't Ukraine go with NATO in the first place?
They kept asking, and
NATO
Ukraine
turned them
did
down.
not meet the requirements to become a NATO member
He's right.
because there was a civil war going on ever
He's
since
wrong, but he's
2014
right.
within Ukraine, where the Ukrainian military and the Nazi militias were attacking Donetsk and Lugansk in southeastern Ukraine.
Okay,
8
so
years.
if you're a member of NATO, you have to meet a certain number of levels of advancement, for lack of a better term. Okay, for example, you have to be a democratic nation. You have to
Right.
allow your people to vote. You have to not persecute on religion. You have to meet these freedoms. And
they-
Ukraine is working on it. They're not all the way there. They're
But they-
working on it. But NATO says you have to be here before we can even consider you. It's like a roller coaster ride. You have to be this tall to ride. Just because you're almost there doesn't mean you can get on there. That's the problem. And it can take 10, 20, 15, 30, 100 years, whatever it takes for you to get to this level of civilization to be allowed into NATO. And that's a really bad way to put it, but that's the easiest way to explain it. But more importantly, it doesn't matter who's got what where. We are in a world that is technologically advanced enough that anybody can launch a missile from anywhere. So the old Cold War argument of we have missile bases in places is so far-fetched and irrelevant. It's almost leaning towards sci-fi. All right, that just blows my mind for someone who's never even been in the military to make a tactical choice on what they're doing, on what they're believing based off of that. So that's
all right, but we're going to go to the comments now because we got to switch topics.
The UN, but NATO is talking about. Hold on, this is important. NATO is talking about allowing Moldavia. They're discussing bringing them in early because of what's happening. Now, here's what a lot of people don't understand, and people don't understand the history of Russia for a second. The Ukrainians, when they were part of Russia, they're their badass fighters. They're the ones who they sent in when people didn't want to cooperate because they don't give up. So why would you attack the people that don't give up? That doesn't make sense.
Got to move on, Wade. Let's go to the comments. Got to go to the comments. So Philip says, Joanna, we don't need Venezuela. We have enough reserves for a very long time. Lindsay says, I agree with the fact that we should not be going to South America. Let's see. Amanda says, we won when we fought against ourselves. Kenny says, it's because war has been politicized. Excuse me. Politicians are so soft now. If you're going to spend money on bolstering your military forces, then put that to work.
Yes.
Philip says, Mel, I like I said, America profits from war, period. The rich profit from war. Everyone else is going to sit in a depression.
Right.
Amanda says, right. Why are we asking? Kenny says, sorry, America is too soft. Lindsay says, it comes down to money and dictatorial beliefs. It's only going to work so long as those items align with general motives. Joanna says, exactly. Lindsay says, lead pipe, anyone? Amanda says, with the lead pipe in the billiard room at Putin's house.
It was the butler.
Philip says, more than a statement, Wade, but he is a bully and he's going to go after what he put his minds, and no one else is going to stop him. Let's see. Kenny says, come on, Jeff. Amanda says, Why should they care about Russian people, Jeff, when supposedly 60% are happy with what they're doing in Ukraine and its people?
Well,
Joanna
can I
says, "Oh
answer
my God."
that one?
Which one do you want to answer?
About how many Russians are happy with what their leaders are doing in Ukraine.
They're not.
Okay. 30 seconds, Jeff. You have 30 seconds.
Great. 30 seconds is great. About 70% of the Russian people support what their government is doing in Ukraine.
They're just afraid of him. That's why they're saying that.
So Hala, let him talk. It's his 30 seconds.
They're happy about it because the people in southeastern Ukraine are basically Russians. They're their brothers, and they were getting victimized for the last 8 years. Something like 14,000 civilians killed by the Ukrainian military through shelling in southeastern Ukraine. And the Russian people were demanding that Putin do something about it. He finally did. Therefore, they support him.
So, just for clarification for the people watching, are you saying that the Ukrainians, let's separate them here for a second. Let's say the president of Ukraine, whoever that is, was shelling his own citizens in that area of the Ukraine, and those citizens are calling on Putin to save them.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Yeah, you've got the problem is that when it comes to a survey, 60% of Russians may approve of what Putin is doing, but 90% of Ukrainians don't, and they're the ones that are having the war in their country. I think they get the vote on this.
I say just take Putin out, then see how many Russians was on his side. I bet you none.
Well, how? With a missile? I mean, because if you fire a missile at the Kremlin and kill Putin and a bunch of others, that's World War III. That's possibly the annihilation of humanity forever. Extinction is forever.
I don't agree. I think we should just take him out.
Yeah, well,
You're risking humanity for what?
War is
For
with
nothing.
them. If the Ukrainians take him out, guess what? That's just part of war.
it won't be the Ukrainians, it will be the Russians. There will be someone senior in the Russians. There will be a coup.
I agree with you, Roger. Someone's getting tired of Putin's shit. He's going to walk down a dark alley one night and he's going to get his.
I hope so.
All right, guys.
That's just wishful thinking. You know, wishful thinking never solved anything.
So we're going to jump in.
It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Guys, we got to move on. We got to touch all these topics
giving up
tonight.
your arms and capitulating.
Moving on, Wade. We are moving on. So everyone has 30 seconds to respond to this. President Biden announces the U.S. is banning Russian oil. Now, countries across the globe have been going back and forth whether they're going to consider putting a ban or a sanction on Russian oil. The United States has finally pulled the trigger and they are banning Russian oil. Everyone has 30 seconds. Wade.
I think it's a great move. Granted, it's going to hurt us, but you can't take and say, I'm taking everything away from you, but I'm going to keep giving you money for oil. I'm going to keep supporting you in the background of your war. That's just silly. You have to cut him off completely. It's going to hurt. It's going to hurt my pocketbook. I totally agree, but it's the right thing to do.
So, Hala?
I second that. I'll drink to that too.
Salud. Jeff, 30 seconds.
Yeah, it's going to destroy our economy. It's trying to cut the world into two opposing camps, economically and politically. And as I said, Russia can get everything it needs from China. If Russia has extra oil, it can sell it to Japan, India, Asia, Africa. Russia will have no problem selling its oil, and it's it'll be hard at first, but after a year, Russia will be doing fine, and America will be in the depths of the worst depression we've ever experienced.
Roger?
nobody knows, and because it's not just oil. There's so many other variables. It's hard to know what's going to go. But I agree. It will create economic challenges. But one thing America has been good at, and Australia as well, where I live, you adapt. It's what I found really interesting was Germany. Germany has had a wake-up call. So they've gone forever saying, no, we're not going to increase our defence spending. Then this has happened, and they've found themselves with a weak military and totally reliant on Eastern Europe for their fuel supply. And they've suddenly been confronted by an unreliable supplier. They will adapt. They will switch to nuclear power coming out of France. They will import their natural liquid gas. They will find ways around it. The human race can be a mess, but they can also be incredibly creative. And it's not the end of the world. It's not the end of America or even Russia, although it's going to be really hard for Russia. And if they want to be pariahs, then they've invited this upon themselves.
Agreed.
So I do want to address.
So
Jeff
I'm going
for
to
a
say
second,
that
though,
President
because-
Biden. Wait,
because-
I didn't get the answer, man.
Oh, sorry. That's your delay. It's not my fault you got the drone on you.
We all know it. We all know. So, so I think President Biden putting the ban on Russian oil is the appropriate thing to do. Even before this war broke out, I saw us heading into a recession. I think we are heading into a recession. I think everything is lining up perfectly for a recession. I think the ban on oil is going to hurt Russia's economy way more for way longer. However, both nations are going to adapt. The United States is going to adapt in a way that it can. We're going to see a recession. We're going to see rising gas prices. Russia will adapt as well. It's going to hit Russia's economy significantly more, make it harder. But Russia is going to lean very heavily on China at the moment. They're going to continue to do this. And again, the globe is essentially being divided in half, with the Western world, including United States, Canada, Australia, UK, and the EU, essentially versus Russia, a good chunk of Asia, and possibly parts of Latin America. The world is being divided, it's being torn in half, and we're even seeing it with who we do business with. And I do think that's one of the reasons why we are heading to global conflict. I know I've been saying I want to avoid the word World War III, the phrase World War III, but I do see that happening because of the way that the economic divide is. There's my 30 seconds, and go ahead, Wade.
So I do want to address Jeff for a second. I mean, you have a unique perspective that
Thank you.
definitely are on an uphill battle with everybody. You are a man by yourself on a hill with no walls. And I commend you for your grasp. You're holding on to that. But I wonder why you believe the things you believe.
Well, I try to look at reality. That's why. I don't think ideology is going to get us anywhere.
Well, like I said, you a better man than me. You hold strong to that, comrade.
It's been a pleasure talking with you all.
So great having you, Jeff. Thank you so much for being on the show with us.
Thank you. It's my first time here.
Yay.
Thanks a lot.
All
And
right,
it
guys.
feels
So
good to be back too. Yeah, I haven't been here for a while.
All right, cut it down, Mel. We're at 60 minutes. We're a minute before 60 minutes. If you don't, we're gonna go over.
I know. So I want to thank Roger and Jeff for being gone. Mel, Wade, and Sohaila will be staying on a little bit longer to talk about the People's Convoy. We're about 5 minutes over. I do want to thank Jeff and Roger for joining us this evening and sharing their thoughts about everything that's going on with the Russian-Ukraine conflict. So, guys, thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, that was fun.
So, guys, it was fun. So, guys, the People's Convoy, really quickly, last few seconds, and I know my internet is not working well because of the drones trying to knock me out in the place that I'm at. Anyway, so the People's Convoy, Americans tried to copy Canada. It does not look like they're doing a good job. Right now, the People's Convoy has made its way from California to the United States. The People's Convoy leaders went ahead and met with Ted Cruz today to discuss what they're trying to do. And they're going to continue driving around the Capitol Beltway, causing traffic for people in the DMV area until their demands are met. Now, many people saying that this is actually pointless because most states in the country and the majority of the federal government regulations are now basically we're getting rid of all the COVID mandates. So what are they actually protesting? So Wade, I'll go to you first.
So, to be honest with you, I'm not sure. Here's what I know. And I haven't been following this as much as I should have, especially because D. Baker in our community is a long haul truck driver, and he's been posting about it in our community, and he's been asking us to follow. And I apologize because I have not been that ingrained in it because of other projects we have going on. But I just reached out to him and asked him to reach out to you, Mel, because he's part of it. He's there. He sees what's going on. He's boots on the ground. But I'm not sure. And I wonder how much of this is drowned out because of the war coverage. If the war wasn't going on, would they be having the same coverage as the Canadian event? I don't know. And I'm not sure what they're trying to accomplish. And that's my fault because, again, I haven't paid enough attention to it.
But no one has. Literally, the only news covering it is local news, and then Las Vegas Light told me OAN is covering it. So no one's really covering it. No one really cares. And again, no one's really talking about COVID anymore because the numbers have gone down significantly. So,
Right.
Sohaila.
Yeah, and if it's about COVID, well, I mean, why? Why now? I don't get it. I think they just want to say 10-4, good buddy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there is a reason that it is going on. I'm not sure what that reason is, but I think it probably would have been stronger if it was going on at the same time as the Canadian one was. Solidarity, you know what I mean?
So I'm just gonna. I think.
Help us out, Mel. What do you know? Why is this going on now?
So when regulations were still in place, that's when they started planning the People's Convoy. So they were planning it while the Freedom Convoy was going on. But at the same time that they were planning it, COVID numbers were going down. And the government responds to the numbers. If there are spikes, regulations go back in place. If they start to decline, they start to remove regulations. If you literally take out a timeline, you'll see that it matches. But every time there's a spike, you see mandates and regulations go in place. The decline, they pull it away. So we're in a situation where there are really no mandates in place at the moment. No one really cares. COVID numbers are low. It seems as though everything is being handled. But they started planning it when regulations were in place. Now, what they should have done was canceled it. They should have canceled it. But I guess too much planning went into it. But right now, it's almost like they have egg in their face. And it looks as though they're just out there. They're just out there just for the sake of being out there. They just want to complain about something. So I don't think that their message is going to hit home with anyone. Now, let's say a couple months from now, COVID numbers go back up, and then mandates go back up, and they try to protest then. People aren't going to take them as serious because they're going to say, you're just complaining to complain. You complained when there were no mask mandates, because mask mandates are gone for about 70 to 80% of the United States population. They're out there for nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think I would say they're out there for nothing. They're out there because of something they believe in. And
so what do they believe in?
They have the right to protest. As you've said before, you agree with people's rights to protest. If they want to protest the sky as purple, even though it's blue, they have that right. And I'm not trying to make fun of any of the truckers doing the convoy. What I'm saying is that it doesn't matter if it's over or it's not. If they feel that they have something to protest against, that's their right. I'm just not sure what that is.
So let me make a comparison, because this is the way that I view it, right? And people are going to get upset at me, whatever. You guys always get upset with me anyway. It's like Black Lives Matter planning this massive rally in case an officer that killed a black man was found innocent. But he was found guilty and they're punishing him, but then Black Lives Matter still goes out and protests. That's what I feel like it's like, because they're protesting COVID mandates. They're going away. Why are you protesting something that's already happening? And they're saying they're going to continue protesting until all the mandates are gone. It's almost like, I feel like they want to do it and continue doing it. And then when the mandates are gone, they're like, oh, yes, we did it. We won. But we were already taking them away. And let's go to Lindsay's comment really quickly. Lindsay says, our company just lifted mask requirements effective today, stating that if our customers require mask for delivery, drivers and they are required to follow, but that's an on-site demand. Everyone is lifting it. There's almost no mask mandates in place anymore, and that's okay because the numbers are down. It's okay. So I don't understand why you're protesting something that's already happening. It's like your demands are being met, but you're still fighting. You're
right. Somebody needs to ask them.
Well, like I said, D. Baker's boots on the ground. I just reached out to him and said, reach out to you at booking@melandre.com and let's see.
Don't get my email like that.
Don't email booking@melandre.com. I'm just saying. But yes, let's talk to somebody who's got boots on the ground and has got a better understanding of what's going on. Because if they're protesting their underwear is too tight, that they still have the right to do that, whether it's over or it's not.
Bring them on the show.
Yeah.
Bring them on the show.
So we'll bring him on the show.
Well, that's why I reached out to him. Let's see what he says, and we'll go from there.
Let's go to these last comments, and then we're going to call it a night. Amanda says, if people wouldn't have complained to millennials about their safe place, and they'd have somewhere to complain, LOL. I mean, they do have their safe
I didn't understand that statement.
So I'll say this. The truckers do have their safe space. It's in Hagerstown, Maryland, at the race speedway. That is their safe space at the moment. So they have their speedway. They have it. Lindsay says, I'm at a loss as to what they're protesting about. And that's the thing. I support people's right to protest. But it's like you protesting that you don't want so many blueberries in your muffin, but they stopped putting blueberries in your muffin. Like, that's what I feel like. Amanda says, these people have felt that mask has stood for their freedom this whole time. It's the same people. They've been dumb from the start. Lindsay says, laughing. She gave you the finger. Philip says, great. And then Joanna says, your proof of vaccine is lifted. Exactly. No one's even asking for vaccine mandates anymore. Philip says, great thumbs up show tonight, Mel. Welcome back.
It's good to be back. I missed you guys.
And then Kenny says, laugh my fucking ass off. Blueberries. So yeah.
The blueberries and blue balls.
Ooh.
You want to read the comments from Smoking Bacon before we hop off the air?
So Las Vegas Luddite says this is a toothless ban if it's not followed up by ANWR, Texas, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Mississippi, the Gulf, etc. So I asked him to explain that more, and he says we need to produce again instead of importing. Okay.
Agreed.
And he also says it's a great effort and a great example of how to protest a thing, but it's a little too late. It's basically whiskey dick at this point.
So I definitely agree there. So guys, thank you so much for tuning in with us this evening. Again, we are the Power Hour panel. We come live every single Tuesday evening to talk to you guys about current events and everything that's going on. Wade, talk about the promo you have going on.
Talk about the what? You
What's
broke
going
up.
$1,000 you're giving away.
Oh yeah, so we're giving away $1,000. So right now we have a contest going on for Project Legends Season 2. And I'll drop the links in the comments. And it's really simple. All you need to do is follow the page and take a guess. We're letting out a clue every Monday, and we have some extra bonus entries, things like that. We want you to try and guess the theme before we release it April 15th. There's some people that have come close, but not everyone is. Some people are way over there, some people are way over there, but some people have come close. So I'll drop that link in the comments, things like that, because we're going to start. We have a whole crowdsource campaign going April 15th, and we're going to release the theme April 15th, and it's going to be amazing.
Thank you for tuning in, Joanna. And again, guys, stay tuned. You could literally win $1,000. So Wade will drop that information. So guys, thank you so much.
Cash.
That is cash. Yeah, it's cash.
Yeah.
Cool. 5,000.
And it's not over like 6 months. It's not over 10 years like McDonald's. I'm gonna give you $1,000 if you can guess the theme.
So yeah, that'll be enough to fill up your gas tank one time.
Right.
With the gas prices are going. So guys, thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see everyone next week. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye, guys.